And I wouldn't have believed 3.5 years ago that today I would be doing the kind of work that we're doing. And it's hard to say that we love it because what we're dealing with is severe trauma. But this calling that we felt to come here and serve the people who are fighting for freedom is just been revolutionary as far as my life is concerned. I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Hello and welcome. You know, when the full-scale war began here, thousands and thousands of people came streaming into Ukraine from around the globe, the vast majority of them with the very best of intentions to see how they could help. However, war can oftentimes be somewhat of a siren's call to the world's misfits, or those who have something broken within themselves and come with selfish intent. And yes, there are even those who come with malicious intent, those looking to benefit from conflict and war. Most of those types of people, however, with the duration of time, have either revealed themselves or been found out as to who they truly are. And so they either get kicked out or decide to leave. Many, even before they are caught, as it were, leave of their own volition. And I have been to many wars in my life, but I had never seen it on that kind of scale. Those that remained, though, if they stuck it out for the long haul, as our guests did, then I think at this point we can put a big check mark into the fact that they are here for good reasons. Our guests are two Americans, Rocky Durham and Shannon Taft. They base themselves out in Lviv, which is probably the best place to be if you want to be a logistical hub. It is from there that foreign aid, which crosses over, and they specialize in medical assistance, but not exclusively. From there, you can put things out into the network that stretches to the four corners of the country, most notably right up along the front line where they're maybe needed most. Both Shannon and Rocky also, as they travel around, conduct medical training courses because, sadly, more and more Ukrainians are coming to the realization that they themselves must have at least some rudimentary emergency aid training. We discuss why that is and much, much more. So, Rocky and Shannon, thank you both for coming and speaking with us. The obvious first question is, what brought you to Ukraine?
You want to start, Shan?
Sure. Why not? So I came September 12th, 2023, and I came over with the intent to visit for 3 weeks and do some volunteer work. And at the time, my sister was stationed in Germany with the U.S. Army. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I'll go do 3 weeks in Lviv. I'll go over, see her in Germany, travel around with a remote job, and go back home. And when I got here by day 2, the Ukraine bug got me, and I said, I love the people, I love the culture, the volunteering, and I'm still here.
Yeah.
2 years later. So
yeah.
That's the nuts and bolts.
I mean, I don't want to diminish from that at all, but I have heard that story so many times. I came over to just take a look.
Right.
And saw the strength of the Ukrainian people and what was happening here, fell in love, and now I'm 2
on
years
my
later.
second year TRP and going to continue that and, get 5 years temporary residency and work on permanent. And so that's the path.
It's a great. Were you a former U.S. service?
No, not myself, just other family members, but myself, no, just a visitor coming to volunteer, see how I can contribute.
Yeah, great. And Rocky?
My wife and I have a background with Russian language, and she was a signal interceptor for the U.S. Army, and she was taught to speak Russian there. And I used to live in St. Petersburg, where I taught English 25 years ago.
Yeah,
And when we'd been paying attention to what Moscow was doing with the amassing of the troops pre-full-scale invasion, and my wife was saying they're going to kick off, we knew something was going down. Not just by looking at it. It wasn't. We didn't have any psychic powers or anything. And on the 24th of February, when it kicked off, she was in Phoenix. I was back home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I got on the phone, and it was quiet for a second. She's like, "We're going," and I'm like, "Yeah, we got to go." So we packed up some stuff. April 9th, we ended up on the border. And like Shannon, we expected to be here 3 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, just to see what we could do. But we thought our knowledge of the Russian language might come in handy, which it has. And a couple months later, we went back home, sold our stuff, and moved back to Ukraine full time. So we've been living here for 3.5 years.
Yeah. So now when you were in Petersburg, we're talking around the 25 years ago, you're saying? So in very end of Yeltsin, beginning of Putin, you saw, as I did, because that's when I was living. I was in Moscow. I would much preferred to be in Petersburg.
I didn't care for Moscow.
No, I don't care for Moscow either.
Especially now.
Yeah. I like St. Petersburg as a city, but it's filled with Russians.
Yeah.
You saw the rise of Vladimir Putin. You must have seen the same thing I saw, which was the threat of this man.
Absolutely.
And
people warned us. There were people working for U.S. intelligence who were former KGB officers who had worked with Putin before his ascension. And they were very clear with the warnings about do not believe him. This man is bad. Anyway, it's no surprise to see what's happening now.
Well, it was certainly something I kept my eye on, and I was subsequently here on Maidan, and and had so many Ukrainians coming up to me and saying, Putin will not let us go. He will come for us eventually. And so they kind of made me promise to be here when they did. And that's why I'm here. Had either of you had medical training prior to coming over?
Not prior, outside of 3 years lifeguarding and doing some small, more first aid things like this, but not proper medical training as I do now, or we do now.
I was a chef in my previous existence, and so we had like an AED, and we would teach. We took CPR classes twice a year with the staff. But besides that, no. My wife was a paramedic on an ambulance in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Okay,
but completely different medical practices almost entirely from the tactical medicine that takes place here on the front line.
Mm-hmm. So you come here, you look around, you determine that you want to help. Do you at that point take training yourselves to get to a level where you can?
We started off being completely unprepared. We really had no idea what we were doing, and by account, to look at our trajectory and how we got here, there are so many instances where we could have failed, or it could have gone horribly wrong, or we should have just packed up and gone home. Yeah. However, we met the right people. We made the right decisions at the right time. We made some terrible decisions. We got burned a couple of times, but we thought we'd work with IDPs. I was a chef, so I thought I was going to be feeding people maybe. Yep. We love
internally
animals.
Displaced people. The
IDP, yes, internally displaced people. We, we both love animals, so we thought we can, we see these images on Instagram of a soldier holding a helmet full of kittens. We're like, we can help somehow. And it just ended up taking a diversion from that, because we realized we can feed all the IDPs, not that they don't need food. We can help all of the animals, not that they don't need help. But until we stop the Russians, there's going to be this overwhelming deluge of displaced people and animals. So how do we stop them? And that led us to the place where we are now.
And your organization, tell me about, the services you provide and, maybe the connections with the government and the military that you have. Do you get foreign assistance? Lay out how your group works.
I'll start here and share. So Rocky with Durham Humanitarian urged me to kind of create my own community when I started getting into TAC Med training and other events too I do to connect volunteers. So right now it's not any official NGO or paperwork. I more wanted to focus on creating that social media community where I could post events, share updates, photos, educational material for all the followers to subscribe to. So what my organization does now is we primarily teach tactical medicine based on the training we've both been through in Kyiv and then also in Zhytomyr on combat lifesaver protocol. Mm-hmm. And my niche discovery, similar to Rocky, you just kind of discover a path, was taking that training to the civilian world because, of course, they're prioritizing military training here. But the civilians, say here in Kyiv, that are experiencing drone attacks every night and you have to wait a minute before the ambulances show up. How can you help your neighbor out with this advanced training? And so my goal was to bring that to volunteers and to civilians. So since March of last year, Lions of Lviv has trained over 600 people. That also includes military. We've done and trained military units that have requested it, but our connections usually come from word of mouth on different NGOs in different cities. So that's primarily been my focus. And then I partner a lot with Durham Humanitarian. They've been here longer in Ukraine and have a few more connections and also help me out with training resources and getting in, helping direct aid where needed on that tactical medical front.
How has the turnout been amongst your average Ukrainian citizen? Has there been a strong response because of the realization of any one of us at any time in the middle of the night could be called upon to put on a tourniquet?
Well, I can say that the response has been excellent, and I don't know if this is fortunate or unfortunate, but there's been more requests for training than we are able to fulfill. So whenever it comes to expanding an operation, then it becomes tricky because not diluting the offering is a major concern of ours, and making sure that anyone representing Durham Humanitarian or Lions of Lviv is of excellent quality, because when you put your stamp on it here, as we all can attest to, that your reputation is everything in Ukraine. And that's magnified, I think, within the volunteer community. So unfortunately, this is a greater need than we can fill just amongst ourselves, but we get after it, and we're at work. There's no days off.
Yeah. And do you, because you're not the only guys doing this. I mean, do you coordinate with other organizations who also kind of have the same mission statement?
I think one of the wonderful things about the volunteer community here in Ukraine is the networking. And when you kind of get into the inner circle, or maybe you create your own inner circle and your own secure network of like-minded or organizations and individuals that are pushing the same direction with similar ethics to your own, that you can really grow and vibe with, if you will. To have that is really the greatest resource. So when it comes to these things, we will exchange information. Somebody will say, this unit needs training. Can you guys help out? We'll say, how many people, what time? If we can do it, we will absolutely. But then it also gives us, because we're part of this community, we can reach out to them and say, hey, there's this, or we need help with something. Can you guys help us out? So we are, the synergy here, in essence of, the parts, or the sum being greater, or the whole being greater than the sum of its parts, is really evident within the volunteer community here.
Yeah, it's good. I know that there also have been, some controversies and some disagreements and, resources going to this group or that group and folks kind of fighting over it. But, from what I have seen, everybody at least has the priority of, we're here to help
Right.
Ukraine.
Right.
And that should be the most important thing. I know that oftentimes egos get involved in all the rest
That's
of
one
it,
thing
but
my
it's,
wife and I always say, that to be a really effective humanitarian in this environment, you have to remove ego from the equation. You absolutely have to. And it takes an active resolve to do that, because we do want to look after ourselves, and we do want to be proud of the work that we do. And we would like to get a signed flag from all of the people. And we do want to share that with people. But that has to be just a result of your hard work, not the reason for your hard work.
Yeah, what I have seen in the past, sadly, is again a struggle over resources and things like that, because that has been a problem, and I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about that. Notably, the issue of tourniquets. There's been a big problem with substandard plastic cheapo tourniquets, as opposed to getting the good ones, and there's a lack of them. And then there is the I'm gapping on it, the PFAC, the personal first aid kit. IFAC, individual first aid kit.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a while that was a problem getting those in, because an IFAC, just for those who don't know, and we've had others who've been on who have spoken about these things, they are for a soldier to wear so that the medic doesn't have to have everything on him. The individual soldier will carry this with him,
Right,
so that the medic can arrive and use
right. And these are the supplies for severe trauma.
Right.
So for stopping massive hemorrhaging, opening airways, etc. But you're responsible for your own IFAC as an individual.
Mm-hmm. And how has been getting properly supplied with those? Is that still the difficulty that it used to be? Has it gotten better?
I think that there's, I'm finding there's different channels. We talked about these different groups, and regardless of their ego level, there's a place for everyone here in Ukraine to teach them. So, for example, there's some groups or people that I personally don't really have a great teaching co-relationship with, because our styles are different.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's due to ego or clicks or whatever, it doesn't matter, but they have their place and they're doing good work here in other areas. So as far as resources go, I think that follows a similar thread of they have access to their own supplies and resources. And then there's also, I won't say several, but there's a few key select areas where with required letters from units, for example, there's free donated IFACs available for units, within certain reasons. Say you're trying to outfit 50 soldiers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a letter signed from your commander, Ukrainian commander, there's particular large organizations that will accept that with some kind of picture video proof upon delivery, and they'll provide those to the soldiers, given they're going the right areas. So there's those places that exist. And then over the 2 years of doing this, I found different sources to purchase these individual components of these IFACs at very cheap wholesale prices within Ukraine, and be able to assemble our own kits where needed.
And Durham Humanitarian, we have a different model. So our ideal model, we're a 501c3 back in the States, so a not-for-profit organization,
Right.
tax exempt. So your donations are generously welcome, and write it off.
We will be adding the links down below.
We raise money in America, and we buy supplies in Ukraine. That's our model.
Okay.
So we are, although we do work with organizations who will deliver materials predominantly from England. So there's a couple of British organizations that we collaborate with.
Mm-hmm.
They know that we're good at getting materials directly into the hands of those who need them. And these are like really on an individual basis. Like we know this sergeant needs 12 IFACs, or he needs 40 pairs of socks,
Mm-hmm.
or he needs MREs, meals ready to eat. They need a specific thing. They come to us. We don't stockpile materials. We take the request and we buy specifically what is requested by the unit. So there's zero waste. We don't have any superfluous materials. They get what they request. They don't get, oh, we already had a bunch of Israeli bandages. Now we have too many. That doesn't happen with our operation. That's in the ideal scenario. We get the request, we fill it, and get it directly to them.
And what do you see as the largest request that you're hearing currently out on the front lines and the frontline units? What do they need most right now?
Tourniquets.
It's always been tourniquets.
Always been tourniquets.
Always tourniquets.
Yeah, tourniquets followed closely by IFAKs, but primarily they are issued, IFAKs when they go out, but very basic, usually with one tourniquet. And, something like an IFAK, you want minimum 3. Okay. If you're talking about your personal self and you lose 3 limbs, you got 1 limb left to put them on. But so minimum 3 is what we encourage to pack. So tourniquets is number 1.
We also, I think one of the things that Shannon does because an IFAK is a thing, and it also comes in this Cordura bag, which is really heavy duty, and it's meant to attach to your Molly gear or on your belt or what have you. But a lot of times the IFAK is empty. They still have the Cordura bag, but not the materials that go within it. So these IFAK refills are actually a more economical way to make sure that they have the kit that they need.
And we're talking Band-Aids, we're talking a tourniquet, or a 3. You're saying
tourniquets,
something for a tracheotomy,
a nasal pharyngeal tube, which is the airway that goes through the nose.
Okay, all right.
You don't necessarily have a cricothoracotomy kit in an IFAK.
Okay, so you're going up through the nose.
But you do have decompression needles. You have chest seals.
Yes.
You have a hemostatic gauze, which is gauze impregnated with a blood coagulating agent.
Right.
And then compression bandages,
pair of scissors, and a marker for marking down time, and that's
a combat pill pack, which is paracetamol, meloxicam, and moxifloxacin. So an antibiotic, painkiller, and an anti-inflammatory. So if you are wounded, you take those 3 tablets right away.
And generally a thermal blanket. It's slim. You can put it in there for a shock or hypothermia.
Right.
And what we do as well, just to kind of tack onto that, when I do my civilian courses, most of the courses, I'll take these ingredients, these kits, and I'll usually put them inside I'll get a Ziploc resealable bag from Epicenter or Producti. Okay. So instead of the fancy IFAK corduroy bags, which are great for military, you go do civilian trainings and they're carrying their purse or their backpack or a messenger bag, right? They're not going to carry this IFAK on their belt like a soldier. So I'll take those contents and put them inside a Ziploc bag. They can stuff inside their backpack, so they'll have it readily available.
Right. I'll get back to the civilian aspect of this, but before there is one thing I will say now about the civilian aspect of it, that is that sadly, I know so many Ukrainians who now go to bed with a backpack with what you're explaining, with some a snack, protein bar or a Snickers or something like that. And sadly, some go to bed now with whistles around their neck so that they can.
Terrifying.
They can, I don't. This is what life is in Ukraine now. It's going to bed not knowing if you're going to wake up in a pile of rubble or something. So we'll get back to the Ukrainian civilians in a hot minute here, but I want to continue with the frontline guys and the military guys that you were talking about, and providing them with what they need, what goes into the IFAK that they get. You are choosing these items that go into the military IFAK with the expectation of a certain kind of wound. What kind of wounds are we seeing on the front line? Has it changed? Because at one point we were in all artillery war, basically, and we have swiftly moved to drones. Have you seen a change also in the kind of injuries that are being dealt with immediately on the front lines?
I mean, I think that sure, there has been a change, I think, if you get really close to it. But in general, we're seeing wounds from blasts. So whether it was an artillery shell or an RPG mounted on a FPV drone, rocket-propelled grenade, mounted on a first-person viewer drone that exploded next to them or on them, the wounds are going to be similar to a certain degree, maybe in varying degrees of severity. But there's a lot of amputation and partial amputation. And those wounds, which if you lose part of your limb and have a massive hemorrhage, you can bleed out in 3 minutes. So having a tourniquet to be able to stop the blood flow in under 3 minutes is absolutely key. We have seen so many lives saved with the correct application of a quality tourniquet on the front line. So we do see a lot of people here in Ukraine now who are alive missing limbs.
Yes.
Absolutely 100% guaranteed that without that $35 tourniquet, they would have been a casualty. They would have been 200.
to piggyback onto that is shrapnel and burns from talking about FPV drones. So, they have the mortar on them that go down and get as close as they can to a bunker and explode. And so the last training we did, we went a little north of Kyiv and trained with a unit up there. And they specifically asked, we'd been with them before several months ago, and then we came back and visited again to give some further training. And they said, teach us more about shrapnel and burns because, gunshot wounds aren't too common on this kind of warfare. And so when those FPV drones explode, you're going to get either a burn on the face or both, and the shrapnel as well coming from it, just, wherever it happens to explode near your body. And so they want to know how to address those instantly, would be the highest two, in addition to disfigured limbs.
And I would suspect that when it was more of an artillery exchange war, you also had to deal with a lot more internal injuries because of the concussive blast of a 155 or a 152.
Yeah, broken cracked ribs and everything caused a lot of
stuff that you can't. But one thing that has been, I'm sure, consistent, and it's not just medical training, medical equipment. You need to get these guys off the line. You need to get them. Need to get them. 20, 25 clicks off the line before you can get them to a triage center. Talk to me a little bit about that necessity. If you're not directly involved with, are you aware of? Do you liaise with not just an IFAC, not just dealing with a amputation or a tracheotomy or whatever, but get that guy. Yes. In a Jeep, and you get him the hell out of there because the sooner he can get to proper medical.
This is a very difficult. The evacuation of casualties is very difficult because with the proliferation of drones and the swarms of drones out there, along the front, the 1,000 miles of front or however long it is now, is ridiculous, and it is unsafe to drive a vehicle in there. They have drones that wait on the side of the road, not flying for a vehicle to come by, and they pop up and hit you. They've got the fiber optic drones, which are impervious to any kind of jamming, signal jammers. And even the signal jammers now for the radio controlled drones are being defeated with new technology and, jamming the drone jammer. And so as these technologies progress, it makes moving a vehicle or moving undetected as an individual, thermal imaging is the technology that are packed into these drones is ridiculous. So the wait time is one of the most terrifying things when I imagine these evacuations, that someone is hideously wounded and one of their brothers or sisters has stopped the bleeding and opened an airway, and they have to sit with them for 6, 8, 12, 18, 32 hours waiting for evacuation. And then when they do get evacuated, they're hopefully there's a higher level of care on board that vehicle that's evacuating them. Sometimes there'll be a medic that's trained to a higher level, a CLS or greater. And then you get to a stabilization point, stab points.
What is a CLS?
Combat lifesaver.
Okay.
Which it's just one of the higher step up in the tactical combat casualty care hierarchy. Anyway, and then getting to a stab point where there are throughout this chain of handing over the casualty are just extremely committed, brave, amazing human beings. And those who would choose to do that I have so much admiration and respect for that. We work incredibly hard to make sure they have everything they could possibly need. In fact, that's the reason why my wife and I took the combat medic course. So we got our CMC level, which is a 10-day course that we took here at the ICTM. And we didn't do it because we were going to sign a contract. We did it because we wanted to better understand the challenges that our medics face on the front line, what they face during evacuation, what the challenges are at the stabilization points, and even beyond getting them to the hospital. So we work with individuals throughout this chain, throughout that network of moving casualties.
And you're getting help from also, international and Ukrainian organizations. They're facilitating this as well.
There are. So when we provide these, when we go to any of these trainings, especially military, and can bring IFAC components to restock them, there's probably minimum 3, but usually 5 different organizations I'll reach out to and say, we're preparing to go to this location and train this many troops. What can you help supply us with? And most generously, chest seals, and then the basics of giving them brand new shears and hemostatic gauze is something that's readily available as far as donations go. And then tourniquets, they can be found. They can be usually purchased. We'll raise money for those kind of things. But for military organizations, I would say there's about 5 groups I reach out to.
And I don't know if we touched on this properly enough, but I mean, these tourniquets that you're getting, there was a period of this war where the quality, it wasn't quantity that was the issue. It was quality. They were made of cheap plastic, and they would break. Well,
they're counterfeit. So Cat 7 is the gold standard of tourniquets by anyone's measure.
Right.
And not to say that there aren't tourniquets produced locally of equal or even greater quality, because there are. That's a contentious issue, but Cat 7 is the gold standard. There are Chinese manufacturers who make a counterfeit Cat 7, and it looks to be the same at first glance. It says Cat 7. It has all the right things. There's certain little details that you have to look for to identify it. If you're not familiar with the materials, the equipment, there's certain identifiable, indicators. And once you've seen a cheap tourniquet, you can identify them right away. But it's absolutely certain, if you are someone who has a tourniquet and needs to depend on that at some point, if it's Chinese or you're not sure, have somebody check it or get rid of it, because $35 for a Cat 7 is worth it. It's absolutely worth it.
And I think there are those out there who are generally duped and they buy these things or whatever. But I mean, obviously there is also the problem of corruption internally within. We cannot turn a blind eye to this. Correct. We cannot ignore it. This is a major issue. And when you're dealing with human lives, I mean, to make a couple of extra bucks by buying a cheapo Chinese, it angers me. It angers a lot of my Ukrainian friends and colleagues.
It's criminal.
Yeah, it's literally criminal.
The failure of a tourniquet after application can be fatal. Mm-hmm. And if it came loose or broke in transport and you didn't get to address it right away,
maybe the person is unconscious.
And they might have already lost all the blood volume they can spare by the time that tourniquet was applied. And then if it's to open up and that massive hemorrhage is re-ups, then that's it.
Whenever, you're gone in seconds or
whenever we do any of our trainings, particularly military, because a lot of their stuff is donated and not necessarily through us. They may have received IFACs from another organization.
Sure.
We teach right away. The first thing on tourniquets, I have several fake ones and real ones so I can show you. And, we break some or we bend the plastic of the cheap Chinese ones to show you when you get your donated tourniquets or IFACs, either from your commander or some organization comes through after us and gives you all this free gear. Great. Open the IFAC up and look at those tourniquets, and if they match these fake ones we're showing you here, and they don't pass the test, get rid of them. They're
and as Rocky, you say, I mean, this is probably the most critical, aside from opening the breathing tube, staunching a wound that is near a near an artery or something like that is
that's the first priority,
and that's why I'm not to get too emotional about it, but it is. You're right. It is criminal, and it is. And so, if they're found to be deliberately doing this, I am hoping that Ukrainian authorities are coming down on them like a ton of bricks. I've heard some stories, but corruption and theft and all the issues and all the chaos of the war, it's just some of this is going to be unavoidable. Sadly, but it breaks my heart. It really does.
When Durham Humanitarian sends out gear, though, this is my wife and I putting our name on it when we send it out. So we do not cut corners. Mm-hmm. There are certain when we get a request for a specific piece of equipment or materials, we ask the people, our defenders, we ask them, show us exactly what you're asking for. Like sometimes we'll get requests that are very modest, like, can you just help us out with some trauma gear? And we'll say, well, tell us what you need. Do you need tourniquets? Yeah, we can deal with a couple of tourniquets. And then we have to kind of like, what do you need? Tell us, we'll do our best. If we can't afford it, we will say, no, we can't afford it, but we'll reach out to other people in our network. But whenever we buy a piece of equipment, we do not skimp on quality. I mean, because these are human lives that we are talking about, and you cannot put a value on it. Every life is precious. And if it's $30 versus the $12 you saved on a Chinese fake, or I don't even know how much they cost it, it's there.
Well, I've heard across the board, and this is another reason why I think all of us have fallen in love with this country so much. There's also another aspect about these men and women who are fighting this war, is that oftentimes I have heard, and not just in medical equipment, but in equipment in general, of this like, we don't want to be asking for too much.
Exactly.
Because we know there are other guys on other front lines who might need it more than us.
Right.
And we don't want to take from them.
Right.
So they will purposefully say, oh, we don't need 5 night vision goggles. We'll be fine with 3.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, as an example.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've run into that as well. And it's this sense of common cause and camaraderie and brothers in arms that I find one of the most endearing things about this country.
I have a story about this. One time when we first got here, this is in the winter, like it would have been around November 2022. And we wanted to do something for our soldiers, our defenders. And we didn't have a lot of connections at this point. We knew a couple of people, but we also knew where people were. So we went and bought really high quality thermal underwear, great gloves, balaclava, like winter warm weather gear,
it gets
because
cold
we
here.
were having this, like, if I was cold and wet and sitting in a dirty trench waiting to do my job, just terrifying. And we're like, the least we can do is see if we can keep them warm. So we put together these bags, and we might have had like 40 of them. We weren't sure how to distribute them. So I went out to Kramatorsk, and I just went to the train station and waited for our defenders to get off the train or start to get on the train to, go and do their jobs. And I'd walk up to them and I'm like, you look like you're about a large. You want some, and they're like, no, I can't. I'm not going to take those. There's probably somebody else, who needs them. And
that's in Kramatorsk.
So difficult.
That's
and
Kramatorsk.
In November,
Yeah,
in Kramatorsk.
that is your next stop is the zero line.
Yeah, and then like as one person would take them, he went over and showed his friends, oh my God, look at these great gloves or whatever. And then one would come over like, do you have, my friend, I know he needs one. And they were being honest, like he's much smaller than I am. Do you have like a small in here? And I'm like, oh, let me see what I got. Here's a small for you. Great. And then I'm like, you look like about a large. Here, take one of those as well. And, glory to Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really moving to see their dedication to one another. We talked a little bit about how brave it is for these medics to go up to advanced positions to get people out, even if they do have to wait for 6, 8, 10, 12 hours, whatever it is, God forbid.
Terrifying.
And then one of the reasons why it's so difficult is because, the Russians will purposefully target them. They will wait for them. They will know that there is a wounded Ukrainian soldier, and they will hover and observe and wait. And then when the aid, which, you're shooting in an ambulance, which is, it's
You're not supposed to do that.
Not supposed to do that. That's that's against the I believe it's in the convention, in the Geneva Convention, that ambulances and medical assistance. So that is terrifying for them, and God bless them for doing it. But there's another very cynical thing that the Russians do when it comes to the civilians that you're training to medically help one another out before first responders, is that the Russians will do the same thing. I know for a fact, or from a source that I find impeccable, that in places like Kherson, they will hit with a drone, they will wait for EMT to show up, and then they will purposely hit EMT. I mean, that is weaponizing emergency, medical support. And I just wonder what you guys are hearing from these kind of situations and what your reflections are on that.
We did. I did a couple trainings with Kharkiv Red Cross, one earlier this year and one late last year. and they now have well, at the time I went out there, October last year was the first time we went out and we did some CLS training. But they have a policy in effect now that they can't go respond to a drone attack until 30 minutes have passed of the attack for that very reason, because they are being targeted by double tap attacks. The drones are looking for their red shirts and their ambulance crews to show up and then go ahead and drop a second missile or drone on there. And so when a drone hits, it's solely up to the neighbors and the community and the people around there to provide some aid, because Kharkiv Red Cross has to wait for this 30 minutes to pass before they can arrive. Sad news.
And I know that pisses off the guys in the Red Cross who are chomping at the bit to get out there, but they can't.
Yeah,
and it's a situation where it's a catch-22. I mean, you don't do anybody any good if you rush out there for an awaiting Russian drone to kill you, because then the next time there's a drone strike, you're going to be wounded or dead and unable to. All of this,
unfortunately, with the equipment and materials that they're talking about. So they send out an ambulance right away that's fully loaded and it's got all the quality gear on it, let alone human lives.
Right.
And it's destroyed. Then they're short an ambulance as well. So the next time they don't even have an ambulance to drive out there. So that waiting for the potential double tap attack is just evil on once again on behalf of Russia.
Psychologically,
we have like Red Cross stickers on our Toyota Land Cruiser 120 it's kind of the de rigueur vehicle out here. And when we first put them on, it was like, oh, it's a good idea because you want to make, so there's one on the hood, there's one on the roof, there's one on the back window, there's on the side window. So it just identifies the international symbol of a Red Cross where you have medical aid. Anyhow, then people were saying, oh, you shouldn't have the Red Cross because they're going to specifically target you. So the stickers eventually faded. So now they just like white squares on our car. But my wife and I decided we're actually going to just put the red, duct tape over it to rebuild the crosses, not to try and deter drone attack. But if our vehicle does get hit, I want somebody to show that flaming vehicle with easily recognizable Red Cross stickers on it. So when that hits the internet,
courtroom somewhere, sometime down the road,
right? I mean, and it's not going to stop, but it's not. It's
well, I had the same problem with. Look, from our perspective, I've been covering wars as a war correspondent for 25 plus years. And one of the things that I found most disturbing when this war started was all the guys driving around with press, written all over their vehicles. And I was like, you don't know the Russians like I know the Russians. That's just, that's honey, that they're going to come for. And secondly, one of the other things that I found when the press corps started showing up, and many of them were kind of the younger, kind of trying to break into the industry or whatever. Or they wanted to, earn their chops. Is that they came over here and they did absolutely no HEFAT training, no, hazardous environment first aid training, HEFAT. And it, contrary to me, it made me worry about them, but also it made me angry.
Yeah.
Because it's irresponsible.
It's irresponsible, exactly.
If you are out in a combat zone and you get hurt, it's bad enough you get hurt.
Right.
But somebody's going to have to come and get you.
Can I jump in here? Because this is something that I want the volunteer community to recognize. That, of course, a lot of people want to feel like I am in solidarity with these Ukrainian fighters. So I'm not going to limit my range to places that, on the one line or whatever. I'm going to be out there and I'm going to hand this stuff to them. Here's my recommendation to you. We all understand. We appreciate that kind of resolve to assist and to support the people of Ukraine. But if you become a burden on a system that is already overburdened, you haven't done your job. And if you do not need 100%, if you don't personally need to be there, you've got no business being there.
Yeah.
If you're doing an evacuation or training a class where the individual actually has to show up and be with the people, that's one thing. But if you're for example, when our home is in Lviv, when we get a request for IFACs, let's just say, to some of our medics in Sloviansk, we will say, okay, it'll take us a day to get them together. We purchase the materials. The next day, we drop them off in Novoposhta. We put a 30-kilo box that arrives in less than 48 hours in Sloviansk for like 160 hryvnia. And whereas to drive there would be hundreds of dollars. 160 hryvnia is like, what, $6 or something like that?
Yeah, something like
So
that.
$6 versus...
And Novopochta is the kind of FedEx of Ukraine.
Yes. And so rather than paying hundreds of dollars in gasoline to drive out there and drop it off, which is a misallocation of the funds that we raise. Like we can, and Novoposhta gets it there. I can track the app on my phone. It is an amazing service. We don't need to be there. We miss being there to give our people a hug and to support them and dine, have a meal together and look each other in the eye. It's important. It is important.
Yeah.
But if you don't need to be there, really consider if you need to be there.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think there is something to a savior complex or ego or whatever it is, or, but I do find it irresponsible oftentimes. If you are not properly trained to be in a combat zone, you should not be in a combat zone because you could be a liability.
Right.
But that then brings us the combination of these two things of, you shouldn't be there if you don't have to be there. And you could be a liability to somebody who has the proper training and goes in and does, but is restricted because of like your situation you explained in Kharkiv. But here we find the middle ground, and this is where I think we have issues, and I think we need to address them. And I'm wondering if you're seeing this within the civilian population of Ukraine, is that they're going to have to take care of their neighbor. They're the ones that's going to have to. Are you finding, I know you're based mostly out in Lviv, but I'm sure you're getting requests from communities or hearing of requests from communities. Are the Ukrainian people themselves realizing, given this double tap, giving targeting of emergency responders, that they have to take it upon themselves to be able to get that tourniquet on the neighbor or the down or the next door, whatever. Has that response, has that recognition grown?
It has, and honestly, from the very beginning, it's always been there. The Ukrainian civilian population soaks up this knowledge and training. When we first started getting involved more into the civilian side of things, and more notably some of the more recent ones. There's a great organization in Dnipro called Alpha Omega. They help take in IDPs, particularly from Pokrovsk area and other more frontline areas. And so I've been down there a few times and done civilian training down there, and they can't wait for us to come again and give them a refresher and just soak up the knowledge of how do I help my neighbor if they're hit, if their apartment's hit, how do I help them put on a tourniquet? And so they're very zealous to learn these skills. And so there's in any of the civilian groups I've taught, volunteer-wise, but talking about Ukrainians, there's never been a hesitation or, I need to sit with this for a week and accept the fact that now I could be first responder. They're ready to go right now, and then they want those skills to be able to help.
I would like to say, though, I think that the awareness of the need for the population to participate in this type of training, that needs to be elevated. I think that I don't want to sound like it's all bad and we're all going to die and everybody's going to need to put on a tourniquet to each other. But to a certain degree, if you're living and working here in Ukraine, you should really have some knowledge of helping out your neighbor in a situation where they might have a massive bleed, or you might need to do more than just CPR, which, is something that,
I know at the equivalent of high school level, the youth here at a certain point in school, they'll go attend some kind of, for lack of a better word, survival training. I can't think of the actual name, but they'll learn how to do community defense kind of activities. And so they'll learn this. My understanding, though, is that something like tactical medicine isn't really built into that program. So, for example, they'll go learn how to shoot an AK or how to defend the city. These kind of things is built into the much later education program. But to that degree of elevating awareness, tactical medicine and being able to apply a tourniquet, or how do you use an IFAK, even if it's components in a bag in your backpack. How do you use that if you're walking out of the cafe getting your coffee and all of a sudden a drone hits the productie next door? I think that should be built more into society education especially around Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, certainly. And it's a sad thing that a 17-year-old, instead of learning how to drive a car or,
right,
date the pretty girl in the schoolroom, has to be learning how to strip an AK or how to put on a tourniquet. The whole thing I find reprehensible.
Yeah.
What has been your impression of? I mean, I know you came here, you fell in love. I've heard a lot of those stories. But how has it been for you to be here with the people of Ukraine during a very difficult period of time?
Can I? I've never felt more part of a community than I feel here in Ukraine. And this, as a foreigner, I've never felt a sense of belonging anywhere else in the world. And I've had the good fortune of traveling and working in lots of other places outside of the U.S., but there's something really special about the sense of community that is fostered by the Ukrainian people and the culture here, the understanding, the appreciation of being Ukrainian, the pride they have for their history, their culture, their language, their art, their music, and to be invited into this in such a warm fashion. We came over. We're like a drop in the bucket, but we've been dropping into the same bucket for 3.5 years now, and I just can't imagine doing anything else. And this coming from someone who's a fine dining chef feeding the rich and famous, to dealing in things for severe trauma, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, it's unfortunate that it was the war that brought me here finally.
Mm-hmm.
This was I'd been to other Eastern European countries and former Soviet republics, but I'd never been to Ukraine. But we came here because of the war, but we stay in spite of the war.
Yeah. Yeah. Shannon?
Same. I have to echo that sentiment, but there's a certain community feel, and some words you just can't find to describe that feeling of home and community, and so you get that feel here. I remember one specific story early last year. I went with a few guys. They were doing a little bit of a press tour, and they wanted to see firsthand what are conditions like on what the front line was then. And so we passed through Toretsk, and we kind of get to the outskirts of Chasiv Yar before it's taken over now, I think. But there was an old man. He'd lost his house a couple weeks ago, but we were chatting with some of the troops through a translator and just kind of gauging, what's the situation like out here. And you can tell everything he had, all the belongings he had left was in this like Soviet baby stroller. He was just pushing down the sidewalk and, just had this deadpan look on his face. And so we wrapped up chatting with some of the soldiers we were with over there and went over and talked with him a bit and found out his house had been destroyed a few days ago and everything he had was here. And, he's waiting on some relatives to come pick him up and help him, get to a better city and all that. And so he pulled out a couple sandwiches from what he had up top there and said, "Hey, you want to sit down and eat with me a little bit?" Everything he had was there. No hesitation, and just wanted to sit there and have a meal and chat with us for a bit out of his own food and belongings. Wow. And so, he just shared a bit about his life and history and how he grew up in this town and that was all he had. And there wasn't, it wasn't a desperation and bawling tears. He was very genuine in connecting with us and just wanting to share his history, but then also share his meal with us and just make us still feel part of his life. Yeah. It was very humbling.
And I don't look at the society through rose-colored glasses either. I mean, there are some very serious problems here, and there are people who are taking advantage of this situation. But the vast majority of people in this country are standing shoulder to shoulder. And I've had people say to me, "Why are you there? What are you doing? Isn't it dangerous? Aren't you, or they'll heap praise on me and say, "Oh, what you're doing is so important." And my response is actually, I have never been more humbled and privileged to bear witness to some of the acts of it's not just bravery, although that exists here too. Bravery being, not the fact that you're not afraid, but that you
Do it
perform
anyway.
despite, that you get stuck in despite the fact that you're afraid. But it really has been for me, and I wonder if you guys feel the same way about this, deeply, deeply humbling and a real privilege to see a people who are determined to provide not only for their fellow Ukrainians, but for generations to come. So
the sense of community that exists here manifests itself in a lot of really wonderful ways. And one of the most obvious examples that someone who showed up for the first time in Ukraine and got off the train and stepped out onto the platform can notice is how clean it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because there's a totalitarian regime that's going to throw you in jail if you spray paint or something like that. But there's a sense of community belonging for public spaces, and there's a sense of respect for the land itself, for the country, for Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And to throw like cigarette butts and beer bottles and McDonald's wrappers on the ground is unheard of. Not that you don't see some litter, but there's this sense of pride that is just so obvious that people love it. And that only comes from this sense of belonging and community. Like I'm not going to clean that up. That's not my area. Whereas everything is kind of your area. This is your country. This is your land.
We'll see how long that lasts after the war. I've been coming here long enough that I remember a very different period in time, and the civic solidarity is, out of necessity, but also I think genuine. But we'll see how it lasts.
That is something that's very interesting because my entire experience with this place that I love so much is under martial law during wartime.
Right.
So I only know.
Yeah,
one facet.
Look, Ukrainians are not unique. There is a uniqueness to it, but it's we'll see what happens after the war.
Yeah, and we definitely will. Our plan is to stay.
Yeah. No, I'm Ukraine's going to be part of my life for the rest of my life. I have a feeling. Has this changed? How has this changed you? This experience? Have you? I mean, everybody has a story about maybe somebody they lost or an experience that was a difficult one to bear witness to or changed your perception of whatever it is, human nature, war, humanity.
For me, it's really redefining like what truly matters in life, what truly matters on just a raw human scale. Connection with the guy with all his belongings in there, but then just several Ukrainians I've met, and they're content, they're happy. Okay, they're not, coming from the American, I should say Western culture, but primarily American culture of what's valued, what's important, hustle, job, work, money, you name it, status, career. And so it's completely different, coming over here and volunteering in Ukraine and being part of this home and this community and all that. You see what really does truly value and matter just on a raw human survival. When you work with IDPs and displaced people and injured people and different medical teams, it's like all of those things I used to think were important. It's like it's not anymore. And it's helped reshape my expectations and my thresholds of what is true contentment and happiness in life. And that's just going to help your fellow to survive, help your fellow human to live and still enjoy that community and joy in spite of war and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
I've definitely come to realize that the individual has so much power, and we can do so much just on our own if we have the resolve and the commitment. If there's something that you believe in, if there's a cause that you want to champion, that a single individual can really make a difference. And I sometimes I look back on years of doing other things and I'm like, oh man, I could have done so much more with that. And I'm not going to beat myself up about the past, which is of course, impervious to change. But what I can do is this realization that we are powerful and we can really make a difference. And I wouldn't have believed 3.5 years ago that today I would be doing the kind of work that we're doing. And it's hard to say that we love it because what we're dealing with is severe trauma. But this calling that we felt to come here and serve the people who are fighting for freedom is just been revolutionary as far as my life is concerned. I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
And I think, look, there's one thing that the Kremlin has done very, very well, and that is taken control of the narrative in certain sectors of the United States in particular.
Yes.
I think most Americans still look upon Ukraine as these plucky Ukrainians, David against Goliath, and they like that. Americans like that. Our birth was, if you were a betting man in 1776, you were not going to bet on the Sons of Liberty or the Continental Army, but look what happened. So I think that's something ingrained in us. And I think the vast majority of Americans see Ukraine standing up to this massive enemy that should have, by everybody's estimate, won. But even they don't see societally how Ukrainians are bearing up against this. I mean, it would not have been surprising had society kind of collapsed if the binds that tie, or that the ties that bind rather, could have fallen apart. So there's that messaging, and then there's also the messaging of even worse that the Kremlin sends out to Americans, a certain sector of Americans especially, who turn anti-Ukrainian. They're all corrupt, or they're Nazis, or they're this, that, or the other thing. How do we as Americans communicate to our fellow countrymen what the hell's going on here, who these people are, and why they deserve every damn bit of assistance that we can provide them? How do we get that out to our fellow Americans?
Well, one thing that I would like to congratulate those who see through the Kremlin-controlled narrative and might see a little bit clearer, even though there's spin on either side.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can see beyond the Nazis' corruption, that that the Kremlin is liberating the Russian-speaking Ukrainians from this authoritarian Nazi regime or whatever, if you can see through that, congratulations, because you have resisted a multi-billion-dollar, very highly engineered propaganda machine done by people who do this professionally for decades. This is what they do. And if you have not been if you haven't been infected with that, you're amazing.
And they target us. They do. They know our society.
Absolutely.
And they know the pressure points, whether it's race, class, urban, suburb, rural, whatever. The Russians know exactly how to do what it is that you're outlining.
Shannon might have a better idea of how we resist that or how we counter this information, but it's an interesting world that we're living in now, where once people's minds have been made up, and it especially affects our political beliefs for some reason, that once our minds are made up, it's really hard for individuals to accept information that is contrary to their understanding. And I don't know the answer to it, but I think that bearing witness, like what journalists and reporters bearing witness is going to be the first step towards justice. And we have to be able to show in very open, and I don't know if non-threatening is the word, but we have to show this in a way that, here is what we've seen, not here is what I think you should believe.
Mm-hmm.
But that, and so whether somebody comes over here for a couple weeks, ties some camouflage netting, peels some vegetables at a volunteer kitchen, first of all, thank you and God bless you. But when they go back home to tell the story, you wouldn't believe how beautiful Kyiv is. What an amazing city. We had some great food. We met this wonderful woman, and come back with these people to bear witness, I think, is very key. So I'm not suggesting everybody come over here, but I think it is the duty of those of us who are here to have a voice and to report back.
And to humanize them, I think is very, very, very important. And so I know that there are lots of Americans who are watching right now who are probably yelling at the screen or furiously typing away in the comments column. How can we help? So how can your average Westerner American help out here? What's the best thing that they can do?
Well, I went to a dinner last night that was hosted by this organization, and they'll remain nameless, but it's a big NGO, and they do very good work. And they brought over, in this most recent mission, they brought over something like 55 vehicles to be donated. And along with the 55 vehicles were about 150 foreign volunteers who came over with them. And they started off in England where the convoy started, and they all drove together through Germany and Poland, and then arrived at the destination. They stopped in Lviv and had this like really big party to celebrate everybody. And there are organizations out there that you've heard of that are doing a great job. And I'm not saying to turn your back on these organizations that are doing a great job. If you're thinking about supporting organizations, find someone you trust. Do a little research into them. But some of these larger ones, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to slander anybody, but some of them, when you have an office building and you have a motorcade or you've got a motor pool of 1,000 vehicles in Washington, D.C., and then you also have offices here and you're flying around on the private jet, that comes from donations as well. So I would really like people to look at organizations that are on the ground doing work, communicate directly with them, find out how your donations might be, what kind of materials or services are going to be purchased with this. How is your money going to make a difference? How is your energy? Can you do a fundraiser? Is there some way that you yourself can help? Can you buy materials and send them over? There's lots of ways, but it's not as easy sometimes as just scanning the QR code.
Mm-hmm. When I was making the decision to come over here and doing research, similar to this thread, I would say an actionable step a lot of people can take is you go to your Instagram primarily. That's more heavy over here than Facebook. But you go to your social media accounts and look up a few particular hashtag support Ukraine, hashtag stop the war, things like this. And it'll lead you to a list of a host of NGOs and just take 5 minutes on each, research them and see which ones are truly grassroots doing efforts, and they'll be visible on their social media pages, right? Which ones are visible and doing some true grassroots efforts of delivering. Whenever Durham goes out and does these aids, they promote on social media in a very responsible way to show you the donations you send us, whether that's financial or resources, right? Here's pictures, here's record of where it's going to, so it's all being accounted for. So if you're figuring out trying to help, please come over and visit, more hands on deck. But if you want to help from abroad, do that basic research first, and then make a educated decision on where you should allocate your time.
And I think, if you can specifically, I think it's tourniquets and vehicles. And I myself have contributed to Cars for Ukraine, and I'll put the link down below. I'm involved in that effort, which a lot of online influencers, raise money for vehicles, and then, you'll get a vehicle with your channel's name on it or something like that. And but it's the money that gets channeled, and then there are the operatives in Europe who will physically drive these vehicles. Tourniquets and vehicles, I think. Tourniquets and vehicles. There's lots of other stuff, but those are the two primary ones.
And the needs do change, but unfortunately those two things are pretty standard. Yeah. It doesn't seem like we're going to have
keep them alive in the first few minutes.
Yes.
Get them a vehicle to get off the front line as soon as they can. That saves lives. I'm all for supporting every kind of thing, from weaponry to clothing to whatever it is, but tourniquets and vehicles.
It's a strange world to live in when we try and keep everything in perspective at Durham Humanitarian. It can be heavy when your entire world is severe trauma. Yeah. So when we send out boxes, though, because we know these people, and sometimes we might not have actually seen them in person, but we've spoken on the phone, and we text back and forth, and we know who they are, and we know their kids' names, and we know where they're from, and these are personal relationships that we have with them. So when we send out these boxes, we always put in stuff that like humanizes it a little bit, because just to get a box, they are grateful when they get a box of gear for severe trauma. But then we also give chocolates and 3-in-1 coffee sachets and tea bags and I'll make cookies and send out,
Right.
a couple dozen cookies with some trauma gear. And we always send out socks. It's become kind of our calling card.
Sure.
And no one has ever complained about receiving too
I
many
bet
socks.
not. I bet not.
Yeah.
Well, look, guys, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you having driven all the way out from Lviv to come and sit down with us. Before I let you go, is there anything else you would like our audience or my audience to know before we close out here?
I would love to just shamelessly promote for a second.
Go for it.
Check out Durham Humanitarian on Facebook or Instagram. Have a click around, see what my wife and I have been up to, see organizations.
You got a QR code?
We have
things
links to stuff
or
like
links.
that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll include the links then in the description.
But we would love people to see the imagery, see
if you
the
got a
photographs
URL,
of the people
send me
that
some, and I will include them in this very discussion.
Check it out,
And
we're always
never
happy.
feel bad to shamelessly plug yourself.
We're always happy to speak directly with people who want to support or donate or whatever. We are happy to. You will speak with Emmy, my wife, or me personally, and we will say, what are you interested in? Are you thinking about coming over? Let us help you navigate this terrain.
Yeah. Shamelessly plug yourself by all means.
Yeah.
That's why you're here.
Yeah.
And I love it. So what about yourself, Shannon?
My WhatsApp number's on my Facebook. Call me. No, Slava Ukraini. That's all I would rather say.
Hey, well, Geroyim Slava.
Yeah, I'm happy to chat. Anybody who wants to figure out how to come over here and volunteer, I love giving you advice on how do you get into the country. What apps do I need to download before I come? How much money do I need to bring?
Right.
Call me,
Shannon
message
is
me on
very
WhatsApp.
connected.
We'll chat you.
Yeah. And do be careful about coming over here with
Sure.
an American or a foreign SIM card in your phone,
Right.
Yeah.
especially if you plan on going out east, because the Russians can
don't do that.
target
Yeah.
that. So
Just
that's
don't do
a
that.
dangerous thing. But I appreciate all the effort that you
Thank you.
and other volunteers and folks who are out here trying to save lives are doing. And I do it and have been doing it because I feel strongly that what our founding fathers fought against is in many ways what the Ukrainians are fighting against. And that is why at the end of every episode, as those of you who watch the show regularly, I include a quote from Abraham Lincoln in which he basically says, if the Confederacy wins, I would rather emigrate to Russia where they don't even pretend to love liberty. So even back then, he knew that the uglier elements within our own societies in America and liberal democracies and the struggle for the what is often referred to as the angels of our better nature is exactly the same thing that the Ukrainians are fighting for here. So I appreciate you guys coming over and assisting in that.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for the
I think
opportunity.
all Americans should express their support for Ukraine in whatever way they can.
Thanks,
So
Bill.
thanks for your time,
Well
guys.
said.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.